the wedding no one wanted. The morning sun rose reluctantly over the dusty village of Nandapur, its golden rays unable to pierce the heavy tension hanging in the air. A rooster crowed in the distance, though the sound seemed almost mocking, as if announcing not the start of a hopeful day, but the unfolding of something ominous. Inside a mud-walled house at the edge of the village, Arjun sat cross-legged on the floor, his head bowed, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. He was 22, full of life, full of dreams, yet trapped in a nightmare he had no power to resist. His father, Raghunath, paced back and forth, his weathered face lined with guilt and determination. His mother, Meera, sat silently in a corner, her red-rimmed eyes fixed on her son, torn between helplessness and despair. "Baba, please," Arjun's voice cracked, but he tried to steady it. "I cannot do this. She's older than you, older than Ma. She could be my mother. This isn't marriage, it's a prison." Raghunath stopped pacing and looked at his son with eyes hardened by years of toil. "And what choice do you think we have? Do you think dreams feed families? Do you think your precious ambitions will repay the debt choking us? We owe Lakshman and the moneylender more than we can ever repay. He offered us a way out. This is the only way." "The only way?" Arjun's voice rose, filled with disbelief. "By selling your son like cattle? By binding me to a woman 30 years older just because you failed to manage your debts?" Meera flinched at his words. "Arjun, don't speak that way to your father," she whispered through her tears. "Let him speak," Raghunath muttered bitterly. "He thinks I enjoy this? You think I don't see what I'm doing to you? But life doesn't give choices to men like us, Arjun. We either sacrifice or we starve." The silence that followed was suffocating. The truth was cruel, and Arjun knew it. His family's poverty was no secret. For years, Raghunath had borrowed money to survive droughts, to buy seeds that never yielded, to cover medical bills when Arjun's younger sister had fallen ill. Now the debt had grown monstrous. And then came the proposal, if it could even be called that. Lakshman, the moneylender, had come with a sharp smile and colder eyes. His widowed sister Kamala, 52 and childless, wanted a husband. She was wealthy, respected, and feared in equal measure. She had land, cattle, servants, and a house bigger than any in Nandapur. But she had no one to call her own, and she despised the pitying looks of the villagers who whispered about her loneliness. When Lakshman offered to erase the family's debt in exchange for Arjun's hand, Raghunath hesitated for only a moment before agreeing. It was survival disguised as marriage. Arjun's protests had been ignored. His cries, his threats to run away, even his plea to be allowed to leave for the city and work, none had softened his father's resolve. Now, as the village bustled with wedding preparations, Arjun felt like a man walking toward his own funeral. The courtyard outside was alive with activity. Women decorated the walls with rangoli patterns, children ran about laughing, and men carried chairs and mats for the guests. But beneath the colors and noise lay an undercurrent of gossip. Everyone knew this was no ordinary wedding. "Poor boy," one woman whispered to another as they tied marigold garlands. "Such a handsome young man, wasted like this." "Wasted?" the other replied with a smirk. "He's lucky, if you ask me. Kamala has wealth enough for 10 men. He'll never have to work a day in his life." "Still," the first woman said, lowering her voice, "she's old enough to be his mother. What kind of marriage is this?" Their laughter followed, sharp and cruel. Inside, Arjun sat motionless as relatives fussed over his attire, wrapping him in a cream-colored sherwani, adjusting the turban on his head. He felt like a decorated puppet, each layer of cloth another chain binding him. When the priest arrived, calling for the groom to come to the mandip, Arjun's legs felt heavy as stone. He moved as if pushed by invisible hands, his mind screaming for escape even as his body obeyed. The mandip was decorated with flowers and banana leaves, standing proudly in Kamala's courtyard. She awaited him there, draped in a red silk sari heavy with gold embroidery. Her jewelry gleamed, and her coal-lined eyes sparkled with triumph. She looked regal, commanding, and to Arjun, terrifying. As he sat beside her before the sacred fire, his heart thundered in his chest. The priest chanted mantras, the flames crackled, and the villagers watched with rapt attention. Every word, every ritual, every round around the fire felt unreal, as if you were watching someone else's life. When the moment came to tie the Mangal Sutra around Kamala's neck, Arjun's hands shook violently. He wanted to drop it, to run, to scream, but the weight of his father's gaze, the murmurs of the crowd, and the mocking smile of Lakshman held him in place. With trembling fingers, he fastened the chain, sealing his fate. Applause erupted. The priest declared them husband and wife. Firecrackers burst outside, children cheered, and yet for Arjun, the world had gone dark. That night, the house was quiet except for the faint rustle of wind against the windows. In the bridal chamber, decorated with flowers and incense, Arjun sat on the edge of the bed, his back turned to Kamala. She approached slowly, her sari rustling. "You should be happy, Arjun," she said softly, though her tone carried an edge of authority. "Today, your family's burdens are gone. Everything I own, this house, these lands, my wealth, is now yours as well. You'll never know hunger or debt again." Arjun did not reply. His hands lay clenched in his lap, his eyes fixed on the floor. Kamala sat beside him, studying his profile. "I know you hate this," she admitted, "but in time you will see. I have given you more than any girl your age could. Security, comfort, respect. What more could a man want?" Arjun turned to her then, his eyes burning with suppressed fury. "Choice," he whispered. "I wanted the chance to choose my life, to choose who I love, what I build, who I become. That is what you've stolen from me." For a moment, Kamala's face hardened, her pride wounded. But then, something flickered in her eyes, something Arjun couldn't quite place. A shadow of loneliness, perhaps, or a crack in the mask of control she wore. She reached out as if to touch his hand, but he pulled away sharply. "Don't," he said coldly. Silence stretched between them, heavy and unyielding. That night, Arjun lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Beside him, Kamala slept peacefully, a faint smile on her lips. But for Arjun, sleep never came. His mind was a storm of anger, grief, and questions that had no answers. He had been forced into this marriage. He had lost his freedom, his dreams, his youth. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that life had strange ways of unfolding, that what seemed like a curse today might transform into something he could never foresee. Arjun didn't believe it then, but fate was already moving, quietly, reshaping his path. What no one expected. The days after the wedding crawled by like shadows across a barren field. Arjun woke each morning to the sound of temple bells and the chatter of servants moving about the courtyard. Kamala was always up before him, draped in her silks, giving orders with practiced ease. To the villagers, she looked every bit the proud new bride with her young husband at her side. But inside the house, silence reigned between them. Arjun kept his distance, retreating to the veranda with books he no longer had the heart to read. He had studied engineering before his father had pulled him back to the village. He still carried his notebooks, their pages filled with sketches of bridges and irrigation systems. Now those pages mocked him, a reminder of the life he had been denied. Kamala, for her part, seemed content to let him simmer in his bitterness. She was not cruel, not openly. She provided him with everything, clothes finer than he'd ever owned, food cooked to perfection, servants at his call. Yet none of it mattered. To Arjun, her generosity felt like golden chains. The villagers, however, saw things differently. "Look at him," one farmer remarked at the tea stall. "Living in luxury, eating off golden plates. He should be grateful." "Grateful?" another snorted. "He looks like a prisoner to me. His eyes are always downcast. Wealth can't buy peace, my friend." The gossip spread, and though Arjun pretended not to care, he felt its sting. He wanted to shout that he had been forced, that he had not chosen this path. But what good would it do? To the world, appearances mattered more than truth. One evening, weeks after the wedding, Arjun wandered to the far edge of the estate. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson. There, beneath a neem tree, he saw Kamala sitting alone on a stone bench. Her back was straight, but her shoulders sagged in a way he had never noticed before. Something compelled him to approach. "You sit here often?" he asked, his voice neutral. Kamala looked up, surprised. Then she nodded. "It's quiet here. The only place where I can breathe without people watching me." Arjun hesitated. His anger had not faded, but curiosity pressed him forward. Why did you want this marriage? Why me?" For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice softer than he had ever heard from her, she answered, "Because I was tired of being alone." Her words hung in the air. Arjun frowned. "You don't understand," she continued, staring at the horizon. "When my husband died, I was barely 20. Too young to be a widow, too old, by village standards, to start again. I carried his family name, his estate, his responsibilities. People respected me, yes, but they also pitted me. They whispered behind my back, as if my life had ended with his. They saw me as a shadow, not a woman." She drew a long breath. "I wanted to live again, to feel like I belonged to someone. When I saw you, young, strong, full of life, I thought, maybe, just maybe, you could give me that chance." Arjun stared at her. For the first time, he saw not the domineering woman who had stolen his freedom, but a human being scarred by loneliness. His anger faltered, though it did not vanish. "You could have chosen differently," he muttered. "You could have let me go, let me live my life." Kamala turned to him then, her eyes glistening. "And what about mine? Don't I have the right to want more than silence and empty halls?" Her words struck something deep in him, though he refused to admit it aloud. He walked away that evening without replying, but her confession echoed in his mind long after. Months passed, and with them, small changes crept into their lives. Arjun began taking interest in the estate, partly to distract himself, partly out of stubborn pride. He walked the fields, studied the irrigation channels, spoke with the farmers. What he saw disturbed him: outdated methods, wasted resources, low yields. His mind, trained in engineering, buzzed with ideas. One afternoon, he drew up a simple design to improve water flow. He showed it to Kamala, expecting dismissal. To his surprise, she leaned in eagerly. "You think this will work?" she asked. "I know it will," he replied firmly. "Then do it," she said without hesitation. "Whatever you need, labor or money, it's yours." Her trust startled him. And when the plan succeeded, when the fields flourished with more crops than the farmers had seen in years, Arjun felt a spark of pride he hadn't felt since leaving college. The villagers, once mocking, now approached him with respect. "It seems the boy knows what he's doing," they whispered. Kamala chose wisely after all. Kamala, too, began to change. She no longer carried herself only with pride, but with warmth. She listened when Arjun spoke, encouraged his ideas, and laughed, truly laughed, for the first time in years. Slowly, the walls between them began to crumble. One night, during a monsoon storm, the power went out. The house plunged into darkness, the rain beating fiercely against the windows. Arjun found Kamala in the courtyard, trying to secure a loose shutter. He rushed to help, and together they fought the wind until the shutter held. Soaked and breathless, they stood side by side. Lightning illuminated her face, and for the first time, Arjun noticed the softness in her features, the vulnerability behind her strength. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Not from fear of the storm, but from something deeper. In that moment, something shifted. Arjun's anger had long been a shield, but now cracks appeared. He saw her not as the jailer of his youth, but as a companion in his present. It was not love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something unexpected. Years rolled by. Arjun and Kamala became partners in every sense. Together, they expanded the estate, introduced new farming techniques, and built schools for village children. Their wealth grew, but more importantly, so did their respect. Where once there had been gossip, now there was admiration. To outsiders, their marriage still looked unusual, a young man with a much older woman. But those who knew them saw something deeper: trust, loyalty, and a quiet affection that defied age. Arjun sometimes wondered how his life might have been had he escaped the wedding that day. Would he have built bridges in the city? Would he have married a girl his own age, had children early? Perhaps. But as he sat beside Kamala each evening, sharing tea and stories, he realized he no longer felt cheated. He had found purpose. He had found peace. And, against all odds, he had found companionship. When Kamala turned 70, illness crept into her bones. The once strong woman grew frail, her steps slower, her voice softer. Arjun, now in his 50s, stayed by her side through every hospital visit, every sleepless night. On her final evening, as she lay in bed surrounded by the fragrance of jasmine, she reached for his hand. "You gave me more life than I ever dreamed of," she whispered. Tears filled Arjun's eyes. He bent down and kissed her forehead. "And you taught me that love doesn't always arrive the way we expect it. But when it does, it changes everything." She smiled faintly, her eyes closing for the last time. After her passing, the villagers often spoke of their strange marriage. Some still criticized, some pitied, but most admired. Arjun never remarried. When asked why, he would only smile. "They said it was a curse," he would reply. "But it turned out to be the greatest gift of my life."